Hello again, everyone, and welcome to our town hall. And this is our report out session for the strategy sessions you've just been in. In our town hall, we want to share what we as a community have been learning together, what we've been producing together, and sort of make plans for the future together. I'm so excited to be here with Amy Baylor and Tanya Karelski, our NSF program officers for Reddle, and also Stephanie Teasley, who's been a long-term colleague of mine and who recently joined NSF and is serving as part of the Reddle team. And I'm just going to start out the conversation as we join this with asking Amy first, and then we'll go to others, to share what you've enjoyed about the conference today.
Sure, thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, it's really been fantastic from my perspective because, we spend a lot of time seeing ideas at very early stages. PI share concept papers and those get translated into proposals, that we review and so on. I just think it's so exciting to see things at the more final stages. And I really enjoyed the gallery walk and getting to see, real results from the things that we fund. And that's just been great.
Stephanie or Tanya?
Well, I've enjoyed this meeting every year. I think I've participated in it every year because it gives you such a broad view of what's going on with the science. And I think when I'm not at NSF, back in my faculty job, you tend to get in your lane, right? And you read papers and you go to sessions that are just about close to your work. But here's a chance for us all to sample more broadly what's going on and the kinds of projects that Reddle funds. And I just enjoy seeing that breadth and seeing the enthusiasm that people have for the work that kind of gets woven together that represents this breadth.
And Tanya, you were just telling me about a session that was super interactive that you were in. Do you want to share a little bit with what you found so engaging?
That's right. But I also wanted to mention that what I enjoyed in when people talk about the project, they talked about, quite frankly, about like lessons learned, because research never goes as you plan. Talking about the life cycle, research never goes completely according to the plan. There was always something, new avenues are open, some shortcuts you need to take. So people were quite frank, and they were just saying that during the time, during the 3 years, they've learned quite a bit. I mean, what did you know when they started? And that was the most refreshing thing, because this is what we don't see it this very much in like annual report. Annual reports, people like to present the best of what happened. But here it's and it's not negative. It's it's actually very interesting because, as I say, it's research and exploratory. That's exactly what we're aiming at. Explorations, and that could be negative. It could be just discovering dead ends, which is also good. So that is what I'm enjoying the most. And of course, some of the sessions were very broad. Like I just came here from the session on talking to AI, and I was just also amazed at the breadth of the area that the group that convened was able to cover, which is also very, very, I would say, encouraging, that we're covering so many different directions and so many different points of view on the on problems. And also, another refreshing, and thank you very much for bringing equity so prominently in this meeting, because people just really took notice, and even when they're talking with AI, we also talk about equity. So it's very, very nice that it was put like in their minds, and they started thinking about it, which is exactly what we want to achieve in the next years. So thank you.
Fantastic. That's just great. And I know we have a Reddle proposal deadline coming up. So I hope it really feeds into the proposals that you see coming from the field, this emphasis. Well, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to welcome our graphic illustrator to center stage, and we're going to mostly show the image of the illustration from here going forward. And what we're going to do is we're together going to build out what we have learned about specific strategies. for remaking Broadening. And so he's going to draw. Pete is his name. He's been wonderful to work with. He is going to be drawing what you all tell us you worked on in your sessions. And I know we won't get to the full detail of 11 sessions, each with 5 bold steps, but we're going to preserve the Jamboards too. So nothing will be lost. This is just the highlights. And so now let me invite Stephanie to pick one of the 4 quadrants and invite some comments on it.
Sure, okay. Well, I'm going to pick the research methods area because there's a lot of challenging issues. For example, how learning analytics can better connect with concepts of equity and broadening participation. So how do we make our design methods better in a way that helps us broaden our work? And I'm excited to see what strengths and strategies this community represents or recommends to us with respect to methods. Are your methods changing? How are they changing? What have you needed to change to really embrace this broadening participation?
So I know we have Brian, Marcella, Vitaly, and Michael. Go ahead.
Brian can go. The group that I was in we were talking about inclusive design and methods to support inclusive design. But very quickly, we said, I want to just say where are we today? We decided behind. Behind.
Can you say a little more about that?
Well, it was, I think it was for us even trying to broaden the concept of what does it mean to be inclusive, right? That sometimes inclusive has a very well-defined, Sherry, she did it, but she used her hands. If you have this circle and you gradually open that circle and you start to let people in, right? It hasn't changed really the structure of the activity or the community, whatever you're trying to support. So to think of that more as how do you be responsive so that the borders aren't fixed necessarily, but can be kind of, what's one way to think about it? Trying to sort of, I guess, sort of trying to make it so that everyone can participate, but not necessarily in a fixed way, right? So kind of, again, we're making sort of the borders a little bit more.
Excuse me, Brian. Jeremy, you're still on screen share from our pre-session. So we're not seeing the graphic designer.
Yeah, we want to see the graphic facilitator, not my screen.
Yes. Sorry, Brian.
Yeah, that's over to Jason.
No problem.
How about some of the other panelists? What sessions you were in? Did you talk about methods?
This is Marcelo. I was in a group where we were talking about new human technology interaction. And this is somewhat related to methods, but one of the ideas that came up was this idea that alongside all the methods that we use to, demonstrate how good a piece of technology is, that we also, in our proposals, talk about the ways that we're going to study risk, the ways that we're going to study potential harm. I think that's an area, I feel like as researchers, we're oftentimes trained to highlight all the great things that are happening, and to really incorporate the idea of risk and harm and being reflective about risk and harm into the research that we're doing as one of the sort of methodological expectations that we expect to see. Again, both at the proposal writing part, but also as we go about disseminating and writing about this work.
So focusing potentially, or at least being aware of and thinking ahead about unintended consequences.
Yes.
Right. Yep. Thanks. Anyone else for this quadrant about methods?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit. So I was in a group of learning analytics. We had a very lively discussion, and in relation to research methods, the word human-centered design was coming back to us. So involving that the end user, all the teachers who are kind of the agents of change, involving them from the very beginning to the very end, whole journey. So that was really prevalent in our discussion.
Great. I think we have one more.
Yeah, this is Michael. I was in the Talking with an AI session, and I think we had a really introspective discussion where we were sort of asking ourselves, why do we work on the projects that we work on within talking with an AI? What sort of constraints, how we think about it? And we sort of thought about a lot of different things, like what is valued by our academic communities? What do we assume what young people want in their classrooms? And we had a lot of unanswered questions around what relationships young people really want with a conversational AI. And all of these discussions led us to this, bold step for us, which was to put power back in the hands of the young people themselves. What are the applications that they want? What are the visions that they foresee? And how can we use that to guide the applications we choose and the methodology along the way of getting there?
Great. That sounds
Terrific.
good.
And we're seeing
Yeah.
a lot filled in research methods. And so let's move over to impacts. Was somebody going to ask about that one?
Yeah, sure. I can take that one. Let's say about that. We've heard, and REDL is the current, the current incarnation of REDL is we focus on exploratory research, and so that's the challenge, though, is how do you go from these exploratory projects to have broader impacts? So we know this community is a very creative and visionary community. So how can we connect this exploratory research with the eventual broader impacts?
Great. And we have David and Matt and Sarita, I believe.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Sounds great.
Okay. I guess looking over some of our our bold steps in AI policy, we looked at is there a need for a framework and a common ethical standard that can more or less spell out the appropriate use of AI tech in learning contexts? Of course, we can't, achieve or do this in isolation. We have to work with all of our stakeholders, from educators to youth to school leaders, in the design of these frameworks. So it's one of our bold steps.
Great.
This is Matt, and I'm speaking on behalf of the group who is focused on how do we kind of communicate those impacts and work on our dissemination. And where we are today was kind of self-referential, thinking about our personal skills we need to build to do a better job of that, the relationships we need to build to kind of empower others to do that with us, and the structures we need to help us do that more efficiently. And one of the steps that the group agreed was worth sharing was to really kind of build into our research partnerships mechanisms, so that we're asking folks at the very beginning of our projects where they want to share their stories, where they get their information, so we can do a better job communicating on the popular side rather than the academic side, so that we can meet people where they are.
Super. What about from others?
I'm happy to jump in. Can folks hear me?
Yes.
I was in Research Impacts, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Craig Watkins was in that group as well, but had to leave a little early. And I'd say the arc of our discussion was really about how to think much more expansively about research in terms of who we engage, from the development or design of a research agenda all the way through to dissemination. So we talked extensively about how we include students and teachers and parents and community-based organizations and informal learning environments. So we had these sort of three bold steps in terms of broadening, really broadening about who we think is part of the ecosystem. Again, going back to what Craig talked about in his talk, what are the learning organizations, the community-based organizations, the informal organizations that have a place in these research projects. We talked quite a bit about broadening in terms of stakeholders and who participates in the research, all the things I just mentioned in terms of students and teachers, parents, etc. But that also thinking about broadening in terms of a research topic. What makes a research topic a valid topic, and who has input into that? And at the very end of our discussion, we have this really, at the very end of our session, we have this really interesting conversation about, is broadening enough? And it doesn't seem like it is. It's a combination. It's broadening and it's empowering. It's not enough to broaden. We also have to be able to empower all of these learning organizations to be part of this conversation, all of these stakeholders to feel like they have a place to participate in this work, all of the stakeholders to have a say in what's a valid research topic, et cetera. So I thought, for me, that was a big takeaway from our discussion about bold steps. This convergence of broadening and empowering is really what we want to do.
I like that. I mean, maybe that's our conference next year, right? Our next convening is moving from broadening to empowering. I like that. Looking
There you go.
at the stakeholders, right? We just mentioned in the other session, looking at the stakeholders being who are we working to to empower, make sure they have a voice. Great, that's great. Marcelo, I think you had another comment.
Yeah, I think one of the other ideas that came up within the group that I was working with was really around sort of institutionalizing and really also moving towards impacting policy. That if there's ways that our research can really be used to help inform policy, that should be part of that end goal, because I think that can be one of the things that puts sort of safeguards in place to protect people, and also starts to put expectations and standards out there that really allow for some of our work to have a broader impact.
Thanks, Marcelo. That's terrific. Let's go to Tanya and have you pick one of the other quadrants so we can start filling it in.
I think I'm going to pick up the life cycle project, research life cycle. And that is actually an interesting concept because, as I already mentioned in my little speech here in the beginning, the project, the plans which are formulated in the proposal, which we award, sometimes go not necessarily according to the plans, to the technical plan in the proposal. And I wonder what exactly would be people take on that. I just can say that from our perspective, it's a good thing, because if it deviates completely from, not completely, but somewhat from the technical plans. And I just also wanted to mention that in our annual reports, please do not try not to mention it. It's good. It's good if you find something new and you want to open some new avenue and you want to just discuss it with us. Please just do that, because either if you're trying to present just the rosy picture, that's not good. It's because it's an exploratory research. Any exploration has its surprises. Could be big surprises. So please just be completely frank with us. It's good. It's good if you find something new or something doesn't work. There is nothing bad about it. Just please. So I would like now to see what people think about their life cycle in the community.
I think we have Naya and Kevin.
Thanks, Jeremy. I can go first. This is Naya. Good afternoon. We were in the proposal process. I was in the proposal group, and we talked about various things ranging from increasing and building capacity to increasing transparency in the review and feedback process. And one of the bold steps that we wanted to contribute here was to make a community engagement plan compulsory as part of the proposal, as part of the actual proposal packet that goes in, as opposed to a paragraph, just a paragraph on broader impacts, which kind of makes it into like a sidekick, but instead have a plan for how you're going to do this. What is your broader impacts plan? That includes things like expanding the research methods and tools and analyses, and including the study participants and the conversations around methods and the data analysis and findings. So what are you actually going to do? What plan are you going to put in place to see these broader impacts come to life, as opposed to just a statement about how we're doing this or doing that in these communities or whatnot? That will also, I think, help with the idea of not knowing how to do something, but instead you're making the plan yourself of how you're going to carry this broader impacts through, as opposed to just saying that you think it's important. Thank you.
Kevin, you're up. You might need
Hi,
to.
yeah, I was on mute. Hi, I'm Kevin. I was in the Broadening and the Research Lifecycle Projects group, which had a really lively discussion. I would really suggest going back and looking at our Jamboard. But the conversation boiled down to, in the project lifecycle, the questions are who gets to participate, who gets to speak, and who gets to hear. Very roughly. And so given our rich discussion, I'm going to cheat a little bit and cram several bold steps into one, but then highlighting one only at the end. Synthesizing all of our discussion, it would come down to get your intentions straight, systems your engineer your project to make sure that you get there, and then finally hold yourself accountable. So that's the bold step, is to conduct regular equity audits about your project, because all the good intentions in the world will not get you anywhere if you're not holding yourself accountable, and if you don't know what you need to do to fix the problems that are preventing you from getting where you want to be.
Thanks, Kevin. I love the idea of an equity audit. I love how our graphic is being built out. I want to mention that very shortly, we're going to invite participants who aren't on stage with us to also share ideas they want to see on the poster. And we're going to do that by the poll everywhere. So my colleagues will be pasting into the chat pollev.com/vils. It's the same one as we've been using before. And you can either upvote or introduce new ideas that you'd like to see this group talk more about in the town hall. But I'm now going to go over to the last quadrant we have about convergence, which to me has meant we have computer scientists in these projects. We have learning scientists. We have people who really have equity as their core issue. And we don't want them like doing in their separate little bubbles. How do we make the work deeply intersect? And so I'd love to hear from Janet, who helped birth, well, really did birth the cyber learning program, and Yoav about what are some of the ideas we have about how do we remake convergence.
So, okay, I'll go first. We talked a lot about how, as other people did, we talked a lot about how we don't really make community members part of our teams. We don't write our proposals with them. We kind of find things out from them, but we don't really make them true design team members. And our bold steps have to do with design, not just designing a single technology or a single something, okay, but thinking in terms of bringing in people from the community to be on design teams so that we actually know what the variations are in resources, in language use, in culture, in all kinds of other things, and design multiple platforms to take the same thing, the same idea, make different versions of it for multiple platforms, VR, laptop computer, VR desktop computer, iPad, designed for multiple platforms to reduce barriers for low resource community. Design packages of technology that together can be used in multiple venues so that people who have ideas can go out and take it into the community with them, to their friends, and do more than they could do in a classroom. Design packages of technology that accommodate multiple skill levels, multiple knowledge levels, multiple entry points. And we think that with that, we're going to be able to make sure lower resource schools and communities can also benefit from our designs, minimize barriers to entry in terms of materials, requisite knowledge, language, and all kinds of other things. And make it easier for learners to explore the things that they're really interested in and to take it with them outside of the venues where they get started.
Yoav?
Yeah, great, thanks. So to round out this round table, I'll report on some of the bold steps that the AI and Ed Futures strategy session came up with. And really with the eye on the prize of thinking about AI to increase inclusivity and equitable outcomes, we came to this exciting, bold step of thinking in terms of developing trustworthy, intelligent agents that build on learner and teacher assets. And what goes into unpack that a tiny bit, this idea of trustworthy agents that build on learner and teacher assets, in order to get there, we need to reflect on what is being assessed and supported in AI. And we need to reflect on power dynamics that occur and can be studied through interactions with virtual agents. To get to that step, we really need to find the points of empathy in human AI collaboration. And to get to that point, we need to listen and observe more, which that was, I think, a common refrain. But yeah, the main, that sort of like distant but seeable goal was about emphasizing the trustworthy agents building on learner and teacher assets.
Cool. Well, thanks for that first round. If we could share my screen to the audience and the participants right now, I just want to show that we're capturing in the poll everywhere some additional bold steps that are coming up from our larger participants. And one I'll just kind of take the top one and say that, does anyone want to say that if it's in our group now? I can do it. Normalize reporting of science communication metrics that demonstrate the reach. So in other words, show that we're actually reaching more people. And when it happens, to ask NSF to talk about that, to celebrate that, to really call it out. So we're going to let this run for a while and occasionally come back to it. And we can go back to the graphic illustrator right now. I just want you to know that we're really paying attention to what you put in here. And we're going to get it all in there as we go. So your voice really matters, even if you're not in one of the speaking roles right now. Another one I'm seeing is allow longer timelines for proposals that seek to improve access to difficult to access groups as co-designers, so that you have time to build the relationships. Actually, I think the Includes program has really led the way in some of that, giving pilot grants that focus on the relationship building. So yeah, let's open up to our panel some other ideas you want to get on the table. And let's go back to the illustrator, please. Panelists?
This is Marcelo. I was actually going to build on some of the ideas around language use, and I think that Janet was sharing. One of the ideas that came up within the group I was in was really around internationalization, and not just from the perspective that, in other countries, people are speaking other languages, but also thinking about the fact that we have a huge population within the US that speaks a wide variety of languages. And at times, if our tools and technologies are not put in a language that they can understand and use, then we've essentially excluded them. But at the same time, it seems like many of the tools of AI, specifically thinking about speech to text and really the translation technologies, it seems like we should be able to be much closer to really being able to provide people access to technological tools in their language of choice. At the same time, in addition to making internationalization a standard, accessibility also being a standard, as opposed to having it be in add-on. I think having those standards in place makes it clear that really the broader population is really welcomed into participating into the design of the various technologies and the use of the different technologies that researchers and collaborators and designers that are in this community are creating.
Marcelo, what you said makes me think about how often we talk about scale and how we want to be able to say that our work will scale. And when you think about what people aren't usually talking about or referring to when they say scale is this issue of inclusivity, diversity, and so forth. So if something is going to scale, it is going to have to be able to consider different people's background and the language they speak and so forth.
Yeah, I think that's the reason why actually another one of our bold steps that we did was about making sure that that all of the design that we do when we're designing technologies and ways to use them is co-design with people who know better than we do what all those variations are. And another thing that we thought should go across everything, as Marcella was talking about, is to support, make sure, require that all of our innovations are asset-based innovations, perspectives, and approaches, not deficit-based.
Cool. Does our panel have other ideas they want to bring up?
Jerry, I have one more that I'll throw in that's sort of related to funding. One of the thoughts and challenges that particularly came up within the new human interaction or human technology interaction kind of group was that within some of our work we end up going into communities that are under-resourced, and we show up there with fairly fancy technologies when at times many of their basic needs aren't necessarily being met. And so one of the bold steps that we were thinking about was, what would it look like for within one of these NSF grants to be able to have a line item that is really about responding to what may be a need in a need that the community has identified that's maybe not strictly related to the actual research itself. And in so doing, help sort of demonstrate to the community that we're not just there to research them. We're not just there to mine this data from them, but we see many of their needs and we really want to be invested in and a part of their community.
That's a bold idea.
And it's a different kind of funding. It's a different kind of funding. It's if you're doing participatory design, you have to do that, and you can't say in a proposal exactly what it is that you're going to be able to do.
Great. We have some more comments coming in from the chat, for example, thinking about the dynamics of participation that may differ in different cultures and communities, ways of knowing, variety of embodied communication, etc. So broadening just has so many dimensions. And I want to invite, if any of our panelists, just kind of a lightning round. Do you have one more thought that you want to get in here? Because we're pretty close to where we're going to need to start wrapping up our town hall.
I feel like I probably talked too much already, but one of the great ideas, and I want to say it was Angela that coined this. It was prioritizing humanity over innovation, and letting that kind of be a guiding principle in the work that we're doing. So that's, I think, one bold idea for us to be able to take as we put together these proposals and as we continue to work with different communities.
Jeremy, I would say, this is Naya, I would say make a rigorous plan. Make a plan. Don't just say it's important. Don't just say we should do it, but make a plan for yourself. Get the help to make the plan.
This is Sarita. I just add the whole conversation about sort of internationalization of language is also about our stakeholders, right? How are we talking about our work to students, to teachers, to family members, to all the stakeholders that are important in this research, and how we communicate research outcomes and questions, et cetera, is part of that.
This is Kevin. I would say another bold idea we had was challenge your usual way of doing things. We too often rely on our own kind of usual practices and social networks when we recruit for project staff, and building out new social networks is a bold goal and difficult.
And we had one more. I haven't talked more than Marcelo, so I think it's okay. And that is one of the bold steps that we had, is something that used to actually be in place when NSF was funding instructional material developments. And that was regional centers and hubs to actually help us take our technologies and take the, for that, in that case, it was curriculum, but take our technologies and curricula out there and make them work in a variety of different situations and help people help organizations, schools, community groups, put them into place, use them. And we could find out a whole lot more there about what our research needs to be if we were doing that.
Okay, any other voices that we want to get in here?
Well, just to say that all of the conversation that has been had here about being prepared for field conditions and real human beings who have needs that weren't, anticipated by the perfect experimental design of proposals, to take this conversation beyond just the people at this convening, you should not only write about these in your NSF reports, but you should publish them in your articles and explain that everything that you thought you knew, you had to throw away when you started doing your research with your actual participants. And when you're reviewing papers, you should also be looking for that honesty in reporting about the discovery of what it's like to really try to do this work the right way.
Amen.
That's terrific. So now let's just, we're getting close to the time we have to wrap up. I just want to give Amy, Stephanie, and Tanya one last chance to comment, and then the Circles team will have a chance to say some thank yous and some goodbyes. So let's go to that. And let me go in the opposite order. I'll ask Tanya to go first.
Well, what can I say? It's a wonderful meeting. And I actually, as usually, when the meeting is so good that you learn a lot. I learned a lot during these 2 days, and I'm really grateful to the circle for organizing it so well. And so then people with very diverse research directions could participate and present our program in its best, diverse and varied way, which is very, very good. The presentation of the program was wonderful. Thank you very, very much.
Going to say I agree with Tanya in terms of things were being so exciting, and I have to also just say thank you for bringing some really terrific keynotes. Particularly yesterday's keynote was a call to arms, a call to action. It was the kind of talk that we don't often hear in academia, and I think there was this great energy that even virtually you could sense for people coming from these kinds of call to arms that she was issuing for all of us. And, I think what I'll take away is this idea about not just acting when it's convenient, but as acting because it's necessary. And thinking about ways that we can empower each other to act, because I think often we act when it's safe. And it's not often safe, especially for junior people, to step out and really challenge the status quo and what's going on. So those of us who aren't junior have a responsibility to support those people and to know that they have allies for pushing these kinds of issues to the forefront and not just, hoping that somebody else will take care of it.
That's a great point. I mean, I'll just end on, my thought about, I really like this broaden to empower. And, as we've talked about, we've had these National AI Institute program, and you may want to keep on the lookout in case there's more updates with that for next year. And we called it AI augmented learning. And I wanted to call it AI empowered learning. And I think that's what we're ultimately looking for, in Retto and our other programs, is to empower learners and using technology, to do that. So I was excited to see that connection made with broadening.
Yeah, it really feels terrific as we come to the time to close this convening, to feel like we've come to a community understanding that we need to go somewhere, that broadening isn't enough and we need to go to empowering. So I just want to echo that theme also and acknowledge that we are closing the meeting, but we are not done. We have opened this community to voices, but we haven't opened them far enough. And we have much work to do in every aspect of what we do. We're going to go forward. Circles.org will have working groups and many other activities. And I'm just going to turn it over to my colleagues to share a couple of the ways you can stay involved, and then we'll have a few thank yous. And so, Sarita, you're going to kick us off.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, no, thanks to everyone. It's been a great couple of days, great discussions. Just to say that all of the resources and materials from this meeting will be available on the circles.org website. They'll also be here in swap cards, so you can come back to it. The wonderful graphic images that have been created by our graphic facilitators will also be shared. So I think one of the most wonderful things about this meeting has been the incredible content that's been generated, and we will be working to make sure that we can share that with everyone that's been part of the conversation. I think I'm going to turn it over to Shari now.
And as all of you prepare proposals, Circles can help you find colleagues with complementary talents to join your team. And as you win projects, we're going to help you promote your work. I'm going to turn over to Erin.
Thanks, everybody. I feel so energized after all the discussions I've had over the past 2 days, and I'm looking forward to keeping them going. So we invite you to participate in working groups throughout the year to keep working on all of these ideas. And next up is Dalila.
Thank you all. I would just like to especially thank our emerging scholars who participated, and we will keep activities going for our emerging scholars, and we invite more emerging scholars to join. I will turn it over to Judy.
I want to thank all of the educators who participated and give a special shout out to Sarah Hampton. She had probably the most liked comments in the chat I think I saw. So thank you, Sarah. And I just want to say we're going to work really hard on all of these challenges around AI and equity in activities with educators. And we're going to think a lot about our AI Institute partners. And, I especially want to thank all of our 40-some session presenters and expertise connection sessions, to everyone who tweeted, to the program committee, to our graduate students. There's just too many folks to name. So if I've forgotten to name you, I am sorry, but thank you.
So we're so grateful for all the circles who came together in this circles convening. And we have a thank you slide. If you could go to my slide share now. We had a program committee put this together. We're grateful to them. We had tech facilitators who volunteered their time to help with technology issues. We had advisors who helped steer us in the right direction, and great communications with NSF staff. And so we're going to keep helping you. Please come to our website, read our newsletter, check out 5 ways Circles can help you. Check out the Rapid Community Report series. It's a great way to share the kind of insights that you've been hearing in posters, for example. I really recommend you read the Educator Circles blogs. There's some terrific blogs that educators are writing about AI, and you need to hear their voices. Well, just to close, I really believe that together we can do this job of remaking, broadening, and heading towards empowering, and that we thank you for being a great community over the past 2 days, sticking with us when the technology didn't, and just persisting and being part of it. And so as we close this convening, we really hope you will make plans to stay in touch with us and continue this work so that when we come together next time, there'll be even more great stuff to communicate. So stay in touch, and goodbye for now.